Critics who say networks like Fox News and Newsmax fueled election misinformation want cable providers to drop them, just as Twitter and Facebook dropped former President Trump. But that's going to be an uphill battle for a few reasons. Bloomberg media reporter Jerry Smith joins me now with more. Hey, Jerry, happy Friday, and thanks for being here. I loved your most recent story on Bloomberg all about this. Fox News was the most watched cable news network in the U.S. last year. So despite the fact that critics are saying, hey, we want our cable providers to give up actually providing us with Fox News, give us an idea of how hard it would be to get those cable providers to drop the network.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, since the Capitol riot a couple of weeks ago, there's been this growing debate about who should be held responsible. And, we're starting to see calls for cable companies like Comcast and Charter Spectrum and DirecTV to drop Fox News and One American News Network and Newsmax, all of whom have raised doubts about the election results. But it's a little more complicated than, say, Facebook or Twitter or YouTube suspending someone who violates their policies. Cable channels have ways of actually ensuring that they don't get dropped. For example, Comcast, they own their own news channels like MSNBC and CNBC, and there are some limits. The FCC put some limits on Comcast, and anyone like Comcast, they can't discriminate against other channels that compete with their own. So it would be very challenging for them to drop another news channel. Another thing about the way the media business works is channel owners, they sell all their channels as a bundle. So if you wanted to drop Fox News, you would also, your customers would also lose access to the Fox broadcast channel, which airs NFL games. And so someone who's a Comcast customer might be disappointed, that they can't see an NFL game, even if they don't want to pay for Fox News.
Talk about that a little more here, Jerry, because just because, a cable provider or somebody who's a critic of Fox News says, hey, we want you to stop carrying Fox News, that could mean that, the company that owns Fox News could say, okay, well, then, if that's the case, we're going to drop other Fox networks from this cable provider, and then you won't have your NFL games, right?
Exactly. And another thing, Newsmax and One American News Network, they are, they're not part of these media conglomerate like Fox News is. So, but they have their own way that they could potentially make sure they don't get dropped. The FCC, there's these statutes called least access rules. And essentially, if you're an independent programmer, you can pay to get distribution. Normally, the cable provider pays the channels for the rights to carry their channels, but you can actually pay if you're an independent channel to make sure that you get on the cable dial. We saw that a couple of years ago, actually, a channel called RT, was once known as Russia Today. They managed to pay to get distribution on a lot of cable systems, even though there was this government report that the U.S. government put out saying that they had, helped the Russian government allegedly interfere with the 2016 election. So it is very challenging to actually drop any of these news channels, even though there's growing calls for these cable providers to do that.
There's a really interesting line in your piece, Jerry. You write that before the Capitol riot, cable and satellite TV providers, they went largely overlooked in the debate over how to shut down misinformation. Well, at the same time, companies like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, they've lived under a microscope. And you write that TV companies would likely prefer to keep it that way. I know you spoke to sources at these companies. What in general are they telling you, and what are the TV companies saying about this debate?
Yeah, my colleagues and I reached out to all the major paid TV companies, and very few of them had anything to say about this. I think they would probably like for this topic to go away. Most of them either didn't respond or declined to comment. The news channels, they all insist that they had nothing to do with inciting the riot at the Capitol a couple weeks ago. And they say that any suggestion that they should get dropped from any cable TV package is censorship. So, right now the cable providers are getting more scrutiny, which is unusual for them because this is a conversation that has really focused more on the social media platforms. And for the most part, they are remaining quiet.
What about when it comes to blatant misinformation on the actual TV channels, on the networks. Is there any sort of loophole for the carriers to drop a network because of the type of content that's there?
I mean, these carriage contracts are really long and complicated. But I think for the most part, there's a lot of different ways that the channel owners can make sure that they don't get dropped. And it's certainly if you're a cable provider right now, you're kind of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
If you continue to carry these channels, you're going to get some criticism. And if you drop any of these channels, you're going to get a lot of criticism as well, probably from the people who watch them. So they're in kind of a difficult situation right now. And, broadly speaking, the cable industry is losing a lot of TV customers. So I think they are trying to tread very carefully because this is a business that's already starting to decline.
We hear a lot, Jerry, about the regulatory environment when it comes to big tech companies, both from Democrats and Republicans, though they have different qualms with the big tech companies. When you think about the regulatory environment for these more traditional TV carriers, based on your reporting, are there regulations going to change around them over the next 4 years with the Biden administration?
A company like Comcast, they have a lot of people in Washington who, they've got a large lobbying operation down there, and I'm sure that they, are maintaining relationships with the Biden administration. But for example, with RT, there was actually legislation that Congress passed that allow these cable providers to no longer be required to carry this channel. It was very narrowly tailored to any channel that is either owned or controlled or financed by the Russian government. So you could see Congress in this next administration, pass some sort of legislation that, absolves the cable companies from potentially carrying these channels in the future.
Bloomberg's Jerry Smith. Jerry, thank you as always for your time. A happy Friday and have a great weekend.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.